Hello my friends, and welcome back to Meerkat Musings. Welcome back to the Meerkat Musings YouTube channel. A rather neglected channel, I confess. I have been doing podcasts more of late, but I've hit a brick wall with podcasts. Basically, I need to pay to upload more episodes. I'm not in a position to pay, so I am moving away from that, which is disappointing because I enjoyed making podcasts. And I actually had a ton of material all set and ready to go, but I can't use it. Well, I say I can't use it. Maybe I can. Maybe I can try and rework it into future videos. I don't know. Anyway, here we are back again, back rather appropriately with a Meerkat Muse. What better way to redo a video and relaunch a YouTube channel than with my signature kind of work, so to speak. If you follow Meerkat Musings, then you'll know that I do it's basically a diary, a written diary. Every couple of weeks on a Wednesday, I share the Meerkat Muse, which is basically a summary of my life and my experiences over the span of that couple of weeks. Sometimes it's fairly interesting. Sometimes my life is quiet. Has it been quiet for the last couple of weeks? One could argue yes. As a matter of fact, it has been a somewhat quiet past couple of weeks for me, but punctuated by a few things which I think are worthy of slipping into a Meerkat Muse. In particular, I have been fascinated yet again by scammers, and in particular, the scammers who express a highly unrealistic interest in my books. This happens quite a lot, and it happened twice over the span of the last couple of weeks in a particularly noteworthy manner. A couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by a media agency, and this might be termed very, very exciting. In fact, in some respects, initially it was. I was a bit wary because media companies don't tend to contact me, but this one did, and they expressed an interest in possibly hosting an interview, a video interview about my books, or specifically about one of my books. And this is where the first red flag kind of crept in a little bit, because they wanted to talk about the schism. Now, the schism is part 2 of the Chonif saga. At no point in the email conversations did anyone mention book 1, The Awakening. If you want to discuss my work, I'm all for it, but it's a bit peculiar that you want to start with book 2, and it's marked and advertised everywhere as book 2. It's clearly the second part in the story. So this was concerning, and like I say, a bit of a red flag. But, well, you know what, I thought I would hear things out. And then someone called Zoe basically sort of said, can we do a phone call, just to discuss things in more detail? To which I agreed to a WhatsApp call because they were in America. And needless to say, phone calls between America and UK in like a standard form, so to speak, well, they cost money. And I wasn't particularly prepared to part with money for the sake of a call. I'm sure they weren't either. So had a chat with Zoe on WhatsApp, and it transpired rather quickly, and I don't wish to be stereotypical here, that Zoe wasn't actually American. So I don't know where she's actually from, but she's not American. And I don't think she was actually a Zoe, if I'm being honest. The call just basically kind of talked a bit about what the interview structure would be like, and it was kind of airy-fairy to a degree and somewhat evasive as well. And at the end of it, I asked if they could email me a few more sort of details, and eventually in the course of those emails, we got down to the bottom line, the reality that I had expected, which was the cost of all of this. Now, ordinarily, if a media channel approaches someone for an interview, they're not normally asking the interviewee to pay for anything. I've done YouTube interviews before, and I haven't been asked to put up a single penny towards doing so. So it's curious that this media station, which you would presume, based upon what they said, had a reasonable degree of reach and presumably sponsors, was asking for no less than £900 from me for the privilege of going on their show. Even if this was a legit show, that's a lot of money to fork out with no guarantees whatsoever that I'll recoup that through book sales. I mean, there's testimonies on these sites that claim that it's brilliant, but I have no direct evidence of that. And £900 is a pretty damn big sum of money for me to part with. So I politely declined, and I declined the offer to pay in instalments, because at the end of the day, that money still has to come from somewhere. And it left me feeling disappointed, because there was, as I say, that brief initial optimistic feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this. But of course, in the end, my gut kind of warned me, and I wasn't surprised. The same thing, well, I say the same thing, something similar happened a couple of days ago, and this one, however, was much more obviously a scam. Every now and then I'll get an email, and it goes into the spam folder every now and then, and I'll check the spam folder just out of curiosity to see what's in there. I get emails from people claiming to be authors that want to kind of share their journey with me and have me share my journey with them. What's interesting is some of these authors, without question, wouldn't know that I exist. For example, I was contacted at one point by an author called Ken Follett, who is quite famous in writing circles. In fact, he's had some New York Times best-selling books. There's no way that he would contact me. And the same must be said for Suzanne Collins, who allegedly emailed me a couple of days ago. Now, for those of you who know, Suzanne Collins wrote the Hunger Games books. And those books were, of course, then turned into some hugely successful movies. She is, without a doubt, one of the modern sort of giants in the book world, and has done extraordinarily well out of writing. Her work is popular, her work is successful, so why would she even know I exist, much less email me to ask about my writing journey? Well, the obvious answer is she didn't. Whoever it was pretending to be Suzanne Collins, and I think I would be pretty damn disgruntled to learn there's people out there masquerading as me. But this appears to be a thing in the writing world. People pretending to be famous authors as an attempt to gain and con money out of people. Why would Suzanne Collins want to discuss marketing strategies with me? The obvious answer is she wouldn't. And why would she need to sell marketing services to me? She's worth around about $90 million. So it's not like she needs the extra income from flogging dodgy advertising schemes. She's making enough money from her books and her royalties. So I actually did something here I don't normally do. I humoured this person for a little bit before growing bored as the conversation inevitably slid down the path I suspected it would. I'd like to think no one falls for these scams. Unfortunately, you can guarantee that some people do, otherwise the scams wouldn't exist. If they get 1 in 1,000 people fall for it and then part with money, then in their view, it's a success. But it's also, of course, extremely underhanded. Quite frankly, it's cowardly, and it's cruel to the victims that these people are exploiting. And if you are a would-be scammer who is thinking about doing things like this, And it doesn't matter whether it's about writing or anything else. Have a think about your life and what you want to get from it and what you're doing to other people. Work to better yourself rather than stealing, because that's effectively what you're doing. And you will garner absolutely no sympathy from me in any way, shape or form whilst you're behaving as a thief, which is basically what scammers and con artists are. They're thieves, nothing more than thieves. So anyway, that was my experience with the writing world. Other than that, I mean, I've been inching along with existing writing projects. I'm working on something with my brother-in-law. Around about 26,000 words now into that. I don't know whether I can sort of say that that's sort of like a quarter of the way there or 15% of the way there. I don't know. The story is sort of unfolding as we write it, basically. But there is a format, there is a plan that we're following, but I don't know how long it's going to be. And I've made a little bit of progress with something else. I'm about sort of 8,500 words into that one. It's been tricky to kind of properly harness my mind into writing. I'll be honest, I've been feeling a bit more scatterbrained than usual. Part of that is possibly due to having a cold recently, which tends to leave me feeling quite dour and quite down. I, like most people, of course, hate having colds. It leaves me feeling very lethargic, and I've certainly been feeling that over the span of the last few days. But I am more or less over it now, which is a blessed relief. At one point at work, I honestly thought I was actually going to dry up. I was letting out so much snot and gunk. I didn't think it was possible for a human body to actually do that, but I was. And it was just horrific, it really was. And I felt sorry for my colleagues that were around me. And from the simple perspective of being able to breathe, I mean, it's nice to have clear nostrils again, as you know, breathing is one of my favourite things to do, kind of important. So nice to be back to normal in that regard. And I think I have to blame feeling snotty and grotty for some very strange dreams. I mean, dreams about being back at school with teachers made of ice that then exploded for some reason. No idea what that was about. Dreams where I'm walking around shopping centres with the wife, with trains literally running through the shopping centres whilst I'm testing positive for COVID and hiding that fact for some reason. Dreams where I was Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, and discovering I was actually inside a TV show and then turning into a werewolf. I have no context for any of this. The only thing I can say is that apparently vivid dreams are a sign that you might get dementia later on in life. So basically, on that score, I'm screwed because I have a lot of vivid dreams. I mean, I had a dream about the Alien franchise, but I was able to kind of shift the narrative of the dream to more pleasant stuff, including recording my daughter as a 3-year-old for some reason. So what brought that on, I have absolutely no idea. But yeah, my dreams are extraordinarily eccentric and vivid. What does that spell out for me? I touched upon it briefly. What's been going on at work? Well, not a great deal, I would say. We're out of the winter sale and we've moved into a kind of new promotion, and things are quieter, which in some respects I certainly don't mind. We've had 1 or 2 really manic weekends of late that have left me feeling exhausted. And we've also had a few days which have been, in my view, quite tedious. We had some training on a few things, and that training, whilst, you know, potentially, yes, valuable and important, was very, very monotonous to me, and it was hard for me to stay focused, to be honest, on this particular sort of stuff. It's sort of like back-end stuff, behind-the-scenes stuff, which is important to the products we sell, but not exciting, not interesting, and not something that I could really engage with in any sort of meaningful way, other than the fact that I had to do it for the sake of my job. It's a situation, the tedium situation is something that is probably going to continue. Without going into the details, one of my colleagues has a rather serious sort of medical situation going on. Not as serious as first feared, thankfully, but it's going to put them out of action for around about 6 weeks. And that's going to mean a lot more loan trading for myself and another colleague. I don't mind loan trading to a degree, but there's going to be a lot of it. And with that will bring the very real prospect of alternating quite sharply between boredom and stress. I would prefer boredom to a degree, but I don't really want or need either scenario too much in my life. So it's just going to be a case of really having to sort of knuckle down and try to be focused, which doesn't always come easily and naturally to me. I don't think Meerkat's necessarily geared up for being sort of laser focused. I'm certainly not, but I'll have to try. It's going to be work to do, and to that end, one of the things I want to do is minimize some stuff. I don't want too many store deliveries going on. We don't have the space for stuff as it is anyway. So we'll be, I think, looking in detail at how to kind of minimize that, or I will be looking into that. Bulky deliveries, absolutely not. I'm going to do everything in my power to resist that while there's just going to be two of us. And there's going to be, basically during the week, for all but one day of the week, there's going to be one of us. So we're not going to be equipped to take in large-scale deliveries for customers. The bottom line is they'll have to pay a delivery charge and have it delivered, because we're not a warehouse, we're a showroom. We don't have the means to store stuff. And I, for one, certainly can't keep leaving the store to carry stuff to a customer's car because they couldn't be bothered to pay for delivery. So I think we're going to have to be strict on that, which unfortunately could cost us some business, but I'm not getting tangled up in lots and lots of bulky deliveries. Small bits and pieces, yeah, sure, we've done it before. Bulky orders, heavy orders, it's not going to be practical. It doesn't work for us. So I'm going to have to try and be firm on that score, which won't be necessarily fun, fronting that conversation with some customers, but I don't know what else we can do. Like I say, I can't be running around here, there, and everywhere because someone doesn't want to have stuff delivered. It's not practical for us to receive large-scale, bulky stuff here. And then, beyond that, what's going to happen if we have multiple sets of customers in store? That's not going to be fun. It's going to be a bit of a juggling act, but it's a juggling act we'll have to cope with. People will have to be patient with us, and we'll have to try and maybe funnel people more towards the weekends when there's going to be two of us, and take it all from there. I don't know what else we can do. One thing which did emerge at work, which was a fascinating read, one could argue possibly a bit of a tantrum as well, but we only have one side of the story here, was someone who issued an email to the entire company to resign from the company. They're a manager, or they were a manager of a showroom up north, and they decided to resign in a very loud and very public manner, with an email that was scathing of their regional manager and kind of really hammering them for sexism and for racism. Now, it's juicy gossip and it always draws the eye. How much of it is genuine? I don't know. I can't say, of course. Like I say, I've seen one side to the story. Annoyingly, we're not going to hear any more because the powers that be that cover that region will handle it themselves, and that's going to be all she wrote in that regard. So we'll have to wait and see if we do hear anything more, but I don't expect to, which is a shame because, like I say, it was quite juicy and quite interesting. So that's kind of everything really for me for the past couple of weeks. Not been particularly exciting. There's more exciting stuff coming up in the near future. But I hope that you have enjoyed listening to me ramble. As always, check out meerkatmusings.co.uk if you want to actually kind of read stuff in a more coherent, structured sort of way. And with a bit of luck, I will be able to put together more videos in the near future across various topics you might find interesting. If you do find them interesting, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will chat to you again really soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.